blues. Because I'm back down on my own again. This is the blues I'm playing. Yes, it's a fine old thing. When the night is cold and lonely.
This is a dollar bill.
Was it the money that made me such? Popping the price of the minute. Towing the pictures and signing the bitch. That was exciting to me. I'm so excited to be. Started with nothing, we had to inspire the beat. I was testing to me. I'm getting to it. Feel like the man. I got the plan. I got the shooters, they have a defense. Plump the squad, get put like a sweat. Put like a perk. I'm going ahead. I'm scratching the news, sticking up for niggas. And then you think I look a set. I'm in the kitchen, compressing the back. Taking it down and I sell it for money. The tricks and the crew. I'm watching the rolling the light of the city like the GL3.
Let me some of these George Bush tears.
Do me one favor. Take a few steps back down on my own again. Look at yourself. Matter of fact, take yourself outside your body and then look at yourself and see how you plan yourself. Congratulations. It's potential, no fault.
Yes, it's a fine thing. When the night is cold and low.
Try to be real again, listen, put on more money and show some love.
Yeah, 1 2, mic check, 1 2. Come on in and stick around. Can't be that damn busy to learn about freedom. Come on in, come on in. Let's get it.
Because I'm back down on my own again.
Woo, this shit is strong. Woo, this is strong.
This is the blues I'm playing.
This is the blues I'm playing.
Yes, it's a fine thing.
All right, all right.
When the night is cold and low.
When the night is cold and lonely. Cut. When the night is cold and lonely. When your Saturday night is cold and lonely. Who but me, Uno Self, here to drop these jewels on you. I always find it's a bit difficult to explain things the way that I take them in, because when I take them in, I get epiphanies on taking them in, and I say, okay, I get it, I see what's going on, but then I gotta explain it, and explaining it is difficult. It's a difficulty in itself, just putting together all the words and the timelines for people to take it in layman's terms. I like to give it to you in layman's terms so that you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Then you can choose whether you want to act on that idea or whether you want to study on it, ponder on it, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't sit around and act like, I'm not under the iron fist of the government and there's no rules that apply to me. It's a lot of things that's going on that a lot of people don't know about. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading, a lot of reading, and try to explain some of these things so that you can understand or understand whether you're free or not. So the question here is, are you free? And are you a slave? You know what I'm saying? And so all you really need to do, you need to have a high tolerance of patience. And, I'm going to do some reading. You need to possess the ability to be able to go out on your own and do your own research and your own study so that you can learn things to make them make sense for you, because they already make sense to me. I already know the direction, that I'm being guided toward and the path and how to take that path. But it's all about, I can't take it by myself. So I'm going to drop it on the table and see who picks it up. Not everybody's going to pick it up. It's not for everybody, but that's not my problem. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So let me get started. I ain't going to hold you. Let me start reading. I'm going to tell you where I'm reading from, so you're going to be able to look stuff up and read for yourself, or you're going to be able to watch this video again and do further research for yourself. So like I said, it's going to be a lot of reading so that I can get to the punchline. You know what I'm saying? All right. But mainly the topic is about slavery. I'm going to do reading and I'm going to do my commentating like I do and like I did on my shows. So this is going to get real interesting. So stick around for the ride and check it out. Okay. The topic is slavery. So I'm going to start with slavery. I'm going to read things through these pages here and there. Okay. Slavery. Matter of fact, let me know if I could be heard. Let me check and make sure I could be heard before I start reading. Okay, peace. Can anybody hear me? If you can hear me, let me know. Rob Gore, peace. Reggie, what's up? What's up, bro? Jay, peace. Okay, Hustle Workaholic. Rico Brown, peace. He say that piece you got you drinking from is crazy funny. You did that shit. I'm just drinking I'm just drinking these tears. You know what I'm saying? Oh, these tears are strong as hell. Okay, you can hear me. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. You know what I'm saying? Just check it out. Pay attention. I'm going to do some reading and commentating to get to my ultimate point. All right. So I feel like I got to lead you into this thing. Slavery is any system in which principles of property law are applied to people, allowing individuals to own, buy, and sell other individuals as a de jure form of property. A slave is unable to withdraw unilaterally from such an arrangement and works without remuneration. So a slave is unable to withdraw unilaterally. For those that don't know what that is, that's like a ex parte declaration. You know, you're doing it on your own, saying that you free, making a declaration saying you're free on your own. Slaves can't do that. They need permission from their master to be free. Many scholars now use the term chattel slavery to refer to the specific sense of legalese, de jure slavery. In a broader sense, however, the word slavery may also refer to any situation in which an individual is de facto forced to work against their own will. Scholars also use the more generic terms such as unfree labor or forced labor to refer to such situations. However, and especially under slavery in broader sense of the word, slaves may have some rights and protections according to laws or customs. Slavery began to exist before written history. In many cultures, a person could become enslaved from the time of their birth, capture, or purchase. So it's a few things that stand out to me. One of them is saying that they can be enslaved from the time of their birth, capture, or purchase. Birth, capture, or purchase. All right. And then it say that a slave is unable to withdraw from slavery unilaterally. So they can't withdraw unilaterally. And the slave is under the principles of property law, meaning they can be bought and sold individuals. That's some fucked up, demented shit right there. Okay. Now you can read the rest of that. The definition is slavery. You can Google it, read the rest of it, do more research. I just wanted to point out those few things. I'm going to keep it moving. Okay. Subject. Subject is the new word for slavery. It's one of the new words for slavery. Subject. So looking at the definition of subject, bring a person or country under one's control or jurisdiction, typically by using force. Now, you can't tell me that everything is fine and dandy and you don't feel force to do certain things under the sovereign state of the United States, or the what do they call it? Anomaly laws of the cities, the towns, the villages, and whatever else, the counties, and things like that. Okay, let me get here go the issues, the technical difficulties. I had so many technical issues today, but I said I'm gonna get this thing started. But take notes and pay attention and have patience, and you're gonna get it. Okay, so that's subject. Now we're gonna keep it moving. I ain't gonna hold you. We're gonna go to slavery in the United States. Now keep in mind that the United States was once the colonies which came over, which migrated here as colonies from Britain or something like that. They was under the king's rule, and they were over here. Then they fought for their freedom from taxes and the king's rule, and colonized here and became states. So these current United States were formerly colonies. You got to keep that in mind too. So you know what you're dealing with and under what system you're dealing with. So slavery in the United States is the title here. You can look it up. Slavery in the United States was the legal institution of human chattel enslavement, primarily of Africans or African Americans, that existed in the United States of America in the 18th and 19th centuries. Slavery has been practiced in British America from early colonial days and was legal in the 13 colonies at the time of the Declaration of Independence in 1766. It lasted in about half the states until 1865. Now I'm not no historian. I'm not vouching for none of this history. I don't know what the hell happened. I wasn't there. I'm just giving you the storyline and the concepts of slavery. So I want you to get the concepts of slavery so that we can then know that, you possibly might be a slave, and then you work on a solution on how to free yourself from that slavery. So when it was prohibited nationally by the 13th Amendment as an economic system, slavery was largely replaced by sharecropping. Okay, let me skip a few things. Okay, Colonial America. In the early years of the cheapskate-based settlement, colonial officials found it difficult to attract and retain laborers under the harsh frontier conditions, and there was a high mortality rate. Most laborers came from Britain as indentured laborers. So those were slaves too, and they volunteered themselves to come over to be indentured servants, to be slaves, signing contracts of indenture to pay with work for their passage, their upkeep and training, usually on a farm. The colonies had agriculture economics. These indentured laborers were often young people who intended to become permanent residents. In some cases, convicted criminals were transported to the colonies as indentured laborers rather than being imprisoned. The indentured laborers were not slaves, but were required to work for 4 to 7 years in Virginia to pay off the cost of their passage and maintenance. They were slaves under contract. They were definitely slaves. And Irish came to the colonies in the 18th century, settling in back county of Pennsylvania and further south. Some things I'm going to skip. I don't want to read everything. Okay, Constitution of the United States. Let me see. Slave trade. Okay, slave trade. The United States Constitution barred the federal government from prohibiting the importation of slaves for 20 years. Various states passed different restrictions on an internal slave trade during that slave period. By 1808, the only state still allowing the importation of African slaves was South Carolina. After 1808, legally importation of slaves ceased, although there was smuggling via lawless Spanish Florida and the disputed Gulf Coast. The West was the route, but ended after Florida became a U.S. territory. The replacement for the importation of slaves from abroad was increased domestic production. I don't really want to read all that bullshit. See, they got a lot of bullshit in here, but I want to get to some points. So I'm going to keep it moving on that one and go to different types of slaves. Slavery started in the 1600s in North America. Slavery is a system in which people are bought and sold and forced to work. Slaves can be held against their will from time to time of their capture, purchase, or birth. They can be held against their will from time to time of their birth, and nearly all slaves were not allowed to leave. Slavery emphasizes the ideal of complete ownership and control by a master. Often, slaves were not paid. Different types of slaves. Slaves were brought for many different reasons. All slaves were given different jobs to do, which were chattel slavery. These kinds of slaves could be traded, no rights, and were expected to perform labor and sexual favors to their master's command. Forced labor. These slaves lived off the threat of them or their family being beaten. Serfdom. These slaves worked on the land. A serf was tied to the land and could not leave without their master's permission. A serf also requires permission to marry, sell goods, or change their occupation. Debt bondage slaves. These slaves had to be kept as slaves to pay a debt for someone, usually a relative who was in debt. The debt could go on through generations, and it was usually for slaves to escape. It was unusual for slaves to escape their debt. Forced labor slaves. These slaves lived off the threat of them or their family being beaten. Serfdom slaves. These slaves work on the land. A serf was tied. Okay, that's pretty much the same thing. Slaves without their master's permission. Okay, that's the same thing. Okay, so those are some types of slaves. Like I said, I'm just getting to the punchline. So you can research these other documents all on your own. You can Google different types of slaves and you'll find that document somewhere. Okay, now they have a thing called partis sequitur ventrum, often abbreviated to partis, was a legal doctrine concerning the slave or free status of children born in the English royal colonies, incorporated into legislation in the British America colonies and later in the United States. Partis held that the social status of a child followed that of his or her mother. Now, I want y'all to really take that in consideration. The social status of a child follows his or her mother. Thus, any child born to an enslaved woman was born into slavery, regardless of the ancestry or citizenship of the father. It used to be the other way around. The father, his status, went to the status of the child born. But now they changed it through this doctrine where the mother status made the slave. The principle was widely adopted into the laws regarding slavery in the colonies. Remember, the colonies are the states right now. Once they got free from Britain, did their Declaration of Independence, they became states, United States. States, separate states at first, then they united to United States, whatever they did. And the following United States: eliminating financial responsibility of fathers for children born into slavery. Let me read that over. This principle was widely adopted into the laws regarding slavery in the colonies and the following United States: eliminating the financial responsibility of fathers for children born into slavery. Partis derived from the Roman civil law. The full Latin phrase literally means that which is brought forth follows the womb. Okay, the history. Prior to the adoption of the doctrine in English colonies in 1662, beginning in Virginia, English common law had held that among English subjects, a child's status was inherited from his father, based on the concept that a married couple were a unit headed by the father. The community could require the father to acknowledge illegitimate children and provide some support for them. That's kind of what they're doing now with child support. And arrange for apprenticeship so the children were assured of learning and means of self-support. Courts wanted the fathers to take responsibility so the community did not have to support the children. In 1658, Elizabeth Keyes was the first woman of African descent to bring a freedom suit in the Virginia colony, seeking recognition as a free woman of color rather than being classified as a Negro, African, and slave. Her neutral father was an Englishman and a member of the House of Burgesses. He had acknowledged her. He had her baptized as a Christian in the Church of England and arranged for her guardianship under an indenture before his death. Her guardian returned to England and sold the indenture to another man who held Key beyond its term. When he died, the estate classified Key and her child, also the son of an English subject, as Negro slaves. Aided by a young English lawyer working as an indentured servant on the plantation, Key sued for her freedom and that of her infant son. She won her case. So back in them times, they showed that the only way for her to get free was to sue through the courts. So she found her remedy in the courts. Okay, her remedy was in the courts. She sued in the courts to get free. Got to keep that in mind. Okay. The legal scholar Tanya Lovell Banks suggests that earlier cases in the colonies dealing with mixed race children of ethnic Africans in English had more to do with determining subjecthood than with modern ideas about race or citizenship. English colonists were considered subjects of the crown, but Africans and others in England and the colony at the time were considered foreigners and not eligible for the right of subject. So it was a time where it was you wasn't just generally a slave, you know. So you wasn't dealing with the colonizers, and you were not a slave because you couldn't be considered a subject. So it was the subjects that made the slaves when they came over here that kidnapped people that were actually over here and made them slaves. And then when they broke free, they start making citizens. Okay, let me see. The colonies had no process for naturalizing them as subjects, and citizenship had not been fully defined. The court struggled to define the status of children born to couples of whom one was an English subject and the other a foreigner. So they were just foreigners. The demand of labor led to importing more African slaves as the number of indentured servants declined in the late 17th century. I'm going to skip that. Okay. I'm going to skip that. I'm looking for certain things for people to remember. So try to keep up with me. Give me a second. See, I knew I was going to have a hard time trying to find everything that I was looking for. Okay, Native Americans as slaves. During the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, Indian slavery, the enslavement of Native Americans by European colonists was common. Many of these native slaves were exported to northern colonies and to offshore colonies, especially in the Sugar Islands of the Caribbean. The exact number of Native Americans who were enslaved is unknown because vital statistics and census reports were at best infrequent. Historian Alan Galla estimates that from 1670 to 1715, British slave traders sold between 24 and 51,000 Native Americans, from which is now the southern part of the U.S. Estimates that between 147,000 and 340,000 Native Americans were enslaved in North America, excluding Mexico. Even after the Indian slave trade ended in 1750, enslavement of Native Americans continued in the West and also in the southern states, mostly through kidnappings. Slavery of Native Americans was organized in Colonial and Mexico, California through Franciscan mission. Whatever, I ain't gonna read that. Native Americans holding African American slaves. After the 1800s, some of the Cherokee of the other four civilized tribes of the Southeast started buying and using black slaves as laborers. They continued this practice in removal to Indian Territory in the 1830s, when as many as 15,000 slave blacks were taken with them. The nature of slavery in Cherokee society often mirrored that of white slave-owning societies. The law barred intermarriage of Cherokees and enslaved Africans, but Cherokee men had unions with enslaved women, resulting in mixed-race children. Cherokees who aided slaves were punished. Cherokees who aided slaves were punished with 100 lashes on the back. Damn. In Cherokee society, persons of African descent were barred from holding office, even if they were also racially and culturally Cherokee. They were also barred from bearing arms and owning property. The Cherokee prohibited teaching African Americans to read and write. All right, so I'm gonna stop reading that right there and just commentate. From reading that right there, it appears that, it was so much sexual mixing between the races. So you had so-called Indians mixing with the Africans, the Caucasians mixing with the Africans mixing with the Indians. So it's so much mixing. How do they determine, who was from where and all of that after all of that mixing? So you figure if you have a birthright and you have all this mixing of sexes, then where you're born, you have a birthright to that land. So, me personally, my strong belief is that I didn't come from no damn Africa. All right. Nothing against no Africans, but I ain't come from no motherfucking Africa. And I don't even look African. Anyway, so just remember some concept. We talking about slavery right now, types of slaves. All right, let's go to the Fugitive Act. Let me read a few things from the Fugitive Act. Now, let me see if I can get this up. They have a poster here. This poster says, I don't know if you can see it. This poster says, "Caution, colored people of Boston, one and all, you are hereby respectfully cautioned and advised to avoid conversing with the watchmen and police officers of Boston. For since the recent order of the mayor and aldermen, they are empowered to act as kidnappers and slave catchers. And they have already been actually employed in kidnapping, catching, and keeping slaves. Therefore, if you value your liberty and the welfare of the fugitives among you, shun them in every possible manner, as so may hounds on the track of the most unfortunate of your race. Keep a sharp lookout for kidnappers and have top eye open. This was April, they say it was April 24th, 1851. So with this poster, they was warning people that the watchmen and the police officers were slave catchers. Okay. Okay, now let me go to the background of this. Okay, let me go to the background. By 1843, several hundred slaves a year were successfully escaping to the north, making slavery an unstable institution in the border states. So basically what they're saying is you had these states that made these free laws where people could be free, and you had these states where people were slaves, and if they escaped to these states, then they can sue for their freedom, or they had to be extradited back to slavery. So the earlier Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 was a federal law which was written with the intent to enforce Article 4, Section 2 clause of the United States Constitution, which required the return of runaway slaves. It sought to force the authority in free states to return fugitive slaves to their masters. So it sought to force the authorities. Many northern states wanted to circumvent the Fugitive Slave Act. Some jurisdictions passed personal liberty laws, mandating a jury trial before alleged fugitive slaves could be moved. Others forbade the use of local jails or the assistance of state officials in the arrest and return of alleged fugitive slaves. In some cases, juries refused to convict individuals who have been indicted under the federal law. The Missouri Supreme Court routinely held that the law of neighboring free states, that slaves who had been voluntarily transported by their owners into free states with the intent of the masters residing there permanently or indefinitely gained their freedom as a result. The Fugitive Slave Law dealt with slaves who escaped to free states without their master's consent. The United States Supreme Court ruled in Prigg versus Pennsylvania that states did not have to offer aid in the hunting or recapture of slaves, greatly weakening the law of 1793. After 1840, the Black population of rural Cass County, Michigan grew rapidly as families were attracted by white defiance of discriminatory laws, by numerous highly supportive Quakers, and by low-priced land. Free and runaway blacks found Cass County a haven. Their good fortune attracted to this shit got my vision getting blurred. Attracted the attention of Southern slaveholders. In 1847 and 1849, planters from the Bourbon and Boone counties in northern Kentucky led raids into Cass County to recapture runaway slaves. The raids failed, but the situation contributed to Southern demands in 1850 for passage of the strengthened Fugitive Slave Act. New law. In response to the weakening of the original Fugitive Slave Act, the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 penalized officials who did not arrest an alleged runaway slave and made them liable to a fine of $1,000, about $29,000 into the present day value. Law enforcement officials everywhere were required to arrest people suspected of being a runaway slave on as little as a claimant's sworn testimony of ownership. So somebody can take and do a sworn testimony of ownership, and say that you're their slave, and then the officers had to arrest you and bring you to them. The suspected slave could not ask for a jury trial or testify on his or her own behalf. In addition, any person aiding a runaway slave by providing food or shelter was subject to 6 months imprisonment and $1,000 fine. Officers would capture a fugitive slave where entitled to a bonus or promoted for their work. So if you were, that's like today, aiding and abetting. If you're a runaway, a fugitive, and you aid somebody, you can get time or, consequences behind aiding and abetting them and things like that. So that's kind of like, when you think about it, it's a mirror image of what they did now, how they change it up. I mean, what they did then and how they change it up to now, to make it look different. Slave owners needed only to supply an affidavit to the federal marshal to capture an escaped slave. So you think about when they want to issue a warrant and arrest people, they do an affidavit. They do an affidavit, and they get you arrested through that affidavit. Now, when you think about the 13th Amendment, where it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or a place subject to their jurisdiction. So these are really, really like wordplay. It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime wherefore the party shall have been duly convicted. So this amendment is supposed to be the straw that broke the camel's back. This is supposed to be the one that ended slavery. But if you pay attention to the wording in this document, it didn't end slavery for a few reasons. First, it's just a document. It's an amendment to the Constitution, which, when you think about it, they violate the Constitution all the time. That's why they have so many constitutional suits to enforce it. So now, if they're violating and making you a slave, and you don't know how to sue to enforce it and saying, wait, they're enslaving me. See, they made it so they gave you a certain type of education where you don't even question that they're violating the Constitution. But when you do question it, you don't know how to go about proving that they're violating the Constitution. So with this here, that's based on this protection is based on your ability to sue them. If you don't know how to sue them, or you think that you're going to let an administrative right protect you, then you're going to be a slave in that manner. Here it says except for punishment for a crime. Now, one thing to realize is when you look at the setup of counties, everything, when you look at the United States, everything is counties. Then you have within those counties, you have the mostly everything is counties. Within those counties, you have towns, cities, and villages, and then you have the estate. Those counties are administrative branches of the state. Now, when you think of that word administrative, that's like, let me give an example of administrative. That's like you having a big brother or a little brother, and you telling your little brother, because you crossed me and you over there talking, fraternizing with the enemy, you're not my little brother no more. That was an administrative decision to say that he's not his little brother, when the reality is that's still his little brother. He just made an administrative decision. So with the counties, the way that they have, the way to say that the way to become a slave or a citizen or whatever was through the mother, the birth. So a few things is happening during the birth process when you go into the hospital, or when they creating a record of birth. When you go through the hospital, the mother gives birth to the baby. They grab that baby up and they start filing. They start putting together the documents. The application starts with the application. They start putting together birth documents. They make the report. They report it to the human, what they report it to? The Department of Health. They report it to the Department of Health. So they take and make a record for the person that's reporting it. Now, what they're doing is they're reporting property, right? They said that you got to remember, if this is the document, we're going off of this here, this 13th Amendment. If that's a document that allegedly ended slavery, then it's a bunch of flaws in that for people that believe that freedom. And that stopped them from doing freedom suits. So they thought that automatically they're free. They don't have to sue anymore to get free. They're just free. And then that was the illusion that was perpetuated, throughout all of the states and the colonies and things like that. So the Department of Health just makes the record. They record it. So now the registrar of the state or the county or whatever's on your birth certificate, the registrar, they incorporate the name. They give name to the property. Like if you name something, so they name the property. The name for like a house is the address. So the name for a business is the name of the business, Walmart, whatever you want to call it. The name for the incorporated police station is the name of the police station. So anyway, your name is incorporated. By your name being incorporated, you are now under an administrative rule. Like I said, administrative rule, that means you're already guilty. You already a part of the system. You're already in contract with that system. So therefore, you are a subject. You are a slave to that system. You are a citizen. That's how they make you. When you're born, they have to do a process to make you a citizen. And the process is done through court. So they go and probate, through court for that ownership of you through that name. So they make you the authorized person of that name to use that name, as that name is the corporation. And you use that name as the authorized person. The name is attached to you as surety. So they do that's a security agreement. They do a security agreement. So this is why they issue a birth certificate and they don't issue the record of birth, which shows the security agreement and all the other stuff and the footprints that they take and everything else. So they have to hide that record. And then when they incorporate, and you can research all these things. When you're hearing them, all you got to do is do the research. Maybe I'm not saying them in the line that I want to, because I'm skipping a few things. But when you get the concept that you are incorporated, which is what they call franchise, make you a franchisee of their corporation. So now that you're a franchisee, they have somewhere in the Constitution where they say you can't be disenfranchised, something. I didn't pull that up either. So anyway, with that incorporation, anytime you incorporate, the law says that you have to put an accolade on it, like INC or LTD or LLC or something like that. So the way they hide it, that your name is incorporated, is they do a DBA within that county that you incorporated in, which is the name that they make you the authorized person for and the name that they authorize you to use. So in a sense, through the birth, all the way up until you use the name, the state IDs, the state ID and the passport are administrative documents. That's why, like, if you get child support situation, they can just take your documents. If you get too many tickets, they can just take your documents. Then you have to do an administrative petition. So what the slaves did was petition. The reason why they petitioned is because they were under an administrative ruling. So now you are under an administrative ruling as a citizen, which is a subject, and in sense a slave. So this is one of the reasons why you know, they are allowed to shoot and kill a lot of people and get away with it. And people are not understanding like why these officers and keep getting away with it, because they're protected under the Foreign Immunity Act and things like that. But see, right now I'm trying to get you to get the idea and do the research on the subjection of your slavery, and then I may come back next week or maybe the week after, and then I may give you some remedies that you can do, you know, to be able to sue for personal freedoms. And it's two types of freedoms that you're looking for, which is private freedom and public freedom. Now, the public domain is seized by the king, quote, king. So, you know, you have to do these declarations of independence. You have to do your constitution, and you know what? I may get into that another time, where when you want public freedom, it requires a group of people, a lot of people to get together and basically fight. And sometimes you don't have to fight. If you do it right, you just put up a resistance. If you do that, if you do a resistance without doing certain things, then that's called rebellion. And then they'll bring in the martial law and things like that, because you rebelled as a subject citizen who was naturalized through birth or nationalized through birth, or however they want to call it. But once you learn the birth process, and that's the inner workings of how they enslave you through these papers, the social security and things like that. The reason why they don't let you get rid of the social, because you're considered a dual citizen, a citizen of the state and a citizen of the United States of America, which is the District of Columbia. Now, some of these things you may already know. Some people may already know and some people don't. But when I'm saying these things, I'm saying it for you to go study and research so you can understand your current condition of slavery. And then I'm comparing it to the old days of slavery, where the only way they got free was suing. This system never corrected itself. First of all, it came from Great Britain as colonies, came here, fought off Great Britain to be their own sovereign country, and then, you know, acquire slaves and things like that. And they didn't never set them free. What they did was now they made everybody a slave. So they did that through the citizenship. So now that made everybody a slave, any color, any race. And, you know, like they say, if you try to denounce I'm not saying go denounce your citizenship, because you might not be ready for that. But if you try to denounce your citizenship unilaterally, they don't let it go. Like, it was some people writing up documents, putting them in the courts, saying I denounce my U.S. citizenship. It don't work like that. They have a process. Otherwise, you can't do it because you under a contract. But one thing to remember is that this contract was done with a minor, and it was against your will. So, you know, like I said, I may do a show on that where I show you certain things you can do to get yourself free. But with getting free, you got to really know what you're doing, because when you get free, it's going to get real, basically. So you better have your own resources. You better learn this political game, which, you know, I'll get into that another time. But anyway, so judging from the only way for people to get free was to sue and come in here to the 13th Amendment that claimed that it freed you. I see you, Jeb, but it's bigger than mental slavery. I'm talking about physical documents that they're using to enslave you. Those are not mental. Those are physical documents which is called chattel paper, that they're using. The birth record, the birth certificate, and the certificate of birth. Now, why they issue the certificate of birth is just to prove that they have a record. Like if you had a trust, you don't have to give them your trust documents. You can give them a certificate of trust, which is maybe a one-page document that showed that you have a trust. So they given a certificate of birth to show that they have this record, you know, of this slave and whatnot. So you had the police as slave catchers. When you think about it now, that's what they still do currently to this day, because this, according to this document, it says except being convicted as a crime, the police are the gateway to get you enslaved, because when they charge you with a crime and you get convicted, then you considered a public slave now. So with that, they trade you to these private prisons and corporations and things like that, and get your labor for 25 cents. They really don't have to pay you though. But it's a sweet science, and I don't break it down as good as I take it in. So I'm trying to break it down, and if you do the research and read these things up until modern day, then you can see that slavery was not really 100% abolished. It's still a lot of things that they continue to enslave you behind. So let me go to the freedom suits. Freedom suits were lawsuits in the 13 colonies and the United States filed by enslaved people against shareholders to assets claims to freedom, often based on descent from free maternal ancestors, or time held as a resident in a free state or territory. See, some of these states are still free states, and some are still slave states, but it's so modernized that people don't really recognize what's a free state and what's a slave state. You know what I'm saying? Just like some states, they allow you to have marijuana. Some don't. Some allow you to hold firearms. Some don't. The right to petition for freedom. Now, the reason why they petition, like I said, is because they were already in an administrative unit. It's already administrative. So you have to do a petition to the authority. You're doing a petition to the authority, which was the colonies. The right to petition for freedom descended from English common law and allowed people to challenge their enslavement or indenture. Petitions challenge slavery both directly or indirectly, even if shareholders generally, what do they do with corporations? They make shareholders. That's all chattel paper. When you incorporate, you create chattel documents. And what they do with the contracts is the application is, let's say you have an application, right? The application is something that they'll write up in a manner that it's like you coming to them and giving it to them. In a sense, you're thinking you're getting it from them and you give it back to them. It's really like you just coming to them with this document saying, here, I want to be your slave. Like when you fill out an application for employment or things like that. Or when you get sentenced, first thing they have you do before they sentence you is you sign your sentence. Then when you sign your sentence and you give it back to them, it's you saying, here, I want to do 30 years in the prison. So you just agreed to doing 30 years in the prison. You didn't sue to countersue to contest the sentence and everything else. That's why they do it in two different segments. You get found guilty first, then they sentence you. Those are two different things. So they contract you into the sentence. They trick you to the illusion through the guilty thing and all that shit. Then they contract you and through the sentence based on the conviction or the guilty plea and things like that. That's why they always ask, do you have anything you want to say? You know, they looking for those magic words or that magic plea, to say, what you need to say to get yourself free. But then when you say something stupid like, well, I hope you had a good day. And then they say, all right, yeah, sign that. Then when you give it back, I sentence you to 5 years hard time, 5 years probation, shit like that. Anyway, let me finish reading this. Even if shareholders generally viewed such petitions as a means to uphold rather than undermine slavery, beginning with the colonies in North America, legislatures enacted slave laws to create a legal basis for just subjection. These were adopted or updated by the state and territorial legislatures that superseded them after the United States gained independence. These codes also enabled enslaved persons to sue for freedom based on wrongful enslavement. While some cases were tried during the colonial period, the majority of the petitions for freedom were heard during the antebellum period and in the border of the southern states. After the American Revolution, most northern states abolished slavery and were considered free. The United States Congress prohibited slavery in some newly established territories, and some new states were admitted in the Union as free states. I'm not going to read all that. You can look up a list of slave papers. Slaves had to do certificates of freedom, to show that they were free. But this was after they were already freed with their freedom papers. They had to go to the court to get those enforced to do certificate of freedom papers. And so it wasn't an easy process. So according to the research that I did, and in my strong opinion, the current conditions of slavery are masked to where you're a long range slave now. So you feel free that you can go to the grocery store, but notice, they have the rules in place. So you can go to the grocery store, you can do this, you can buy things, and it makes you feel free. But I'm here to say that you're still a slave. All right. You're not free. And if you don't feel it, then it is what it is. They got you conditioned real good. So you gotta break that. Now, once you learn to sum things up, once you learn that you're free, and your neighbor learned that you learned that you're not free, that you're a slave, they learn that they're a slave, and you start building these communities, and then you start going after your solution, your freedom. Because when all of this happened, people stopped fighting for their freedom. So it nullified them. So now everybody is just happy with dancing and singing and eating chicken and shit and whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's a bunch of slaves right now, and you're not free. But who really cares about that, right? Who really cares? I do. So anyway, I think I'm about to get up out of here. Let me go look at the chat and see what's going on. If you didn't catch the certain things I said, just go back, listen to the video, write shit down, take notes, and look at your documents. Look at your slave owners. Look on the birth certificate. They don't show you the record. It's three parts to the birth. It's the record of birth, the certificate of live birth, and the birth certificate. Now they go to different places and they issue to mass, the secret information, which is the security interest and the surety and all of that was created. Now remember that the status of the slave was dependent on the mother and things like that. So people stopped suing and fighting for their freedom. But I believe that I have a way where you can sue for your freedom, and the way put it to the test, put it through the courts, and see how it goes. We have been doing certain things with the suing for injunctions of constitutional rights and things like that, and constitutional enforcements, which is done through the county sheriff and things like that. I'm gonna talk about that too sooner or later. But I just want you to study this thing here and do compare notes with the things I'm saying, and it's really undeniable. And when you get a certain vision, you can see what it is, you can feel what it is, all the way from the license plates to the stickers, the inspection, and it could be a necessary evil. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, some people have the right to govern themselves, but they circumvent that right with all this illusion. So it make you feel that you so dependent that you can't govern yourself, that it's impossible. But when you have the necessary resources and things like that, like you got a lot of people down in South America that govern themselves. They got their own little tribes and communities and things like that, you know, and that's how it was here as well before they came in with the English spirit or the Britain spirit or whatever they want to call it. But that ain't, you know, that ain't saying nothing against nobody. It's just current conditions. That is what it is. And you have the opportunity to change them. And either you're going to change them or you're going to stay subject to the king, to your king. Let me see what's going on in this chat real quick. I might be a little, let me see if Hollywood and they're talking about overtime. I might be in here a little more. Let me see. Very interesting. She sued for a breach of trust in essence. Yep. Okay. Where can we find this? Where can we find this information? I have some documents that the way that I know that the name was incorporated, because when you file the assumed name, I filed the assumed name with the county that you were born in. They have the record of that. So I filed the assumed name with the county. And when I did the work for somebody else, they said that you can't file this unless we already have you incorporated. So incorporation doesn't happen by accident. You know what I'm saying? Somebody has to go in there and do it and process it and all that. It doesn't just happen. So if they're telling through this letter that they sent, and I showed the letter one day. One time I put the letter up and they just deleted all my YouTubes and all that shit, Facebooks and everything. So I stopped showing certain documents because I don't want my shit keep getting deleted all the time. And I would be surprised they start deleting my pages now. They haven't. I've been kind of treading light. So they're saying that you can't do this unless the name is incorporated. So once you show them that the name is in their files already, then they release the certificate of assumed name. You can do the process on that. So anybody that has done the assumed name with me, they know that their name was already in file, meaning that somebody incorporated. They didn't incorporate it. You know what I'm saying? Have you incorporated your name or did somebody else do it? And when you look on the documents, it has the register on there. It has the county on there, the state. It has the birth documents, have the doctors and witnesses and all that shit. So, you know, when you get that document, then you'll see for yourself, or when you see someone else's, you'll know that that's the process that was done. That's in hindsight. So that's a no-brainer. My book is coming. I ordered some more books. They keep selling out, but I got some ordered and they're going to be coming. So for anybody that's waiting on any orders from me, just be patient. You know, I get out all my orders. They're coming. States' rights were more clean back then. I don't know about that, man. I don't know if the state ever was clean. You know what I'm saying? All right. Okay, let me see. Administrative right. Okay. To bring a suit is to bring a claim. Basically, you're bringing the claim. It's all about the affidavit. When you do that affidavit, you know, that affidavit is going to make the law, and unless it's rebutted, and then you putting together the proof and the evidence to prove your claim. Making a claim is just not good enough if it get rebutted. If you make a claim and nobody rebuts it, you don't have to prove anything unless you're required to prove something. But the overall, what I'm saying is that people think they're free. They're not. If you haven't sued for freedom, then you don't have freedom. There's a maximum law that says he who fails to assert his rights have none. With that assertion, you have to sue to assert your rights. And it also says that in order for a matter to be resolved, it has to be expressed. You haven't expressed anything about your freedom, and like I said, with the Constitution is violated daily. So what makes you believe that they're going to respect this portion and not respect this portion and respect that portion of the Constitution? They steady violating it at every little trick and contract that they can do to pull you into slavery and things like that. So that's why, a lot of these cops, they don't be trying to hear shit you be saying when you be like, I know my rights and all this, because what happens in that situation is in the Constitution, it tells you that the military is subordinate to the civil power. The military is the executive force, executive branch, and the civil power is the judicial branch. So unless you go get that decree of freedom, like they had to get the certificate of freedom to be free and things like that, then you're not free. But I'm not saying a certificate of freedom, but some type of restraint, through the courts for your freedom, for them to stop imposing on your freedom, because they're going to impose on it all day, every day. Let me see. But with the claim is different from a suit. The claim is different from a petition. The claim is also administrative. The claim is coming to that person and writing them a letter formally or something and saying, hey, man, you did this and this caused me this injury and you owe me this. That's the claim. And if you don't make that claim, then you can't bring a suit and win. You can't bring a petition, Okay, let me see. I'm just going down to these comments and then I'm getting out of here. The DBA for a private corporation is conservation. Dred Scott case. Badge is a shield. Okay. They won't release the baby from the hospital until you fill out and sign the birth certificate. I know, because the delay as long as I could to make up my mind about the name, and I got an extra day or two in the hospital. They won't release the baby because they want you to contract. They want to claim that baby. And also, they didn't get anything prior to release that baby. Remember what I read where it said that if the mother, the baby is enslaved according to the status of the mother. So if the mother was a slave, the baby was a slave, and the father had to sue to free the baby. The father had to sue. So let's say the baby is 9 months in the belly. The father, if you was back in those days, the father would probably be preparing the suit for when the baby is born to already sue, whoever. You can do a general suit. You can do, you can sue when you're dealing with something like a quiet title. You can say known and unknown, and that applies to everybody. So anybody with an interest would have to step in and make a superior claim. If that superior claim doesn't prove to be superior, then you win the suit. So in that situation, my personal strong belief is that, and my personal strong opinion is that the father should have sued for that baby to be released to his custody before the baby was born, and bring that decree to the hospital. But this is something that has been done already. So it's not, in this day and age, it seems a little far-fetched, but it's something that has already been done and was done on a common term. It's good you're talking about this, nephew. Okay, that's my aunt, because it's too much excessive force going on by some of the police. It's all administrative slave force. It's administrative. And like I said, if you suing them and doing these getting these decrees and these injunctions and things like that, and then you nullify them with the civil power, which it says that the military is subordinate to the civil power, and they have to give full faith and credit, to all of the judicial acts or judicial decrees. Dwight, do you know about USCI? That's the USCIS. Is that the renunciation of citizenship? I don't advise people to go doing a renunciation, because a few things may happen if you don't perfect, your renunciation. Some people, they do it and then they claim from Africa, and then they get their ass deported to motherfucking Africa. And some people claim other spots and get their ass deported there. You can claim right here on this motherfucking land, America, and they ain't got nowhere to deport you. They make you stateless. So you become stateless. They're talking about it right when you go to the website. I think it's Homeland Security or one of those websites. Denunciation or something, renunciation. But they try to cut you off, and then they try to find you guilty for a crime if you intermingling or some shit like that. But like I said, it's going to be two levels of freedom you're dealing with. One is going to be personal freedom, which is private freedom, and one is going to be public freedom, which is going to be dealing with, the group of people, kind of like Cuba with Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, how they kind of overthrew their government to get their freedom, and how when you look up people that you look up Declaration of Independence, unilateral declarations of independence, look that up, and they'll show a whole bunch of small countries that did declarations of independence, and some of them were recognized as being free and some of them weren't, but they still live within, the geographical areas of where they declared their freedom from. So they didn't have to go running off to other lands and things like that. Most people here, they think they got to leave America and go running to the tropics and shit like that. You stay your ass right here and fight. Fuck all that running shit. The actual expanded that's why the trust. Okay, I'm just trying to catch these comments and get the hell up out of here. I think I spoke my piece. Study on it, and if you don't get it, then hey, my sister Alicia, peace. Preferred stock and common stock. Jay, that's a little too deep for the people. We ain't gonna get into stocks yet. We just wanted to get the concept of that they're still slaving through the chattel paper and things like that. Easy to get people to sign contracts when you don't even read. Most people don't read. People operate under assumption. Yes, a lot of people. Free range slaves, right? Free range slaves. People should read plain language doctrine. Okay, read plain language doctrine if they are adverse to legalese. Okay. Thuggy, shout out to Side G. It depends. BC or app, security card app. But that was my personal experience. Okay, I don't understand you quite clearly, Sai. I don't know if you can come in or not and explain that if you want to. Okay, the links. It's you can look at the links of certain things I said. If you Google them, certain stuff will pop up. I want you to get the concept, and with that concept, you can do anything. I study everything I do. I study based on the concept. That's how I figure a lot of things out and get the good personal experience of things. Let me see where we at. See what time it is. I'm gonna go to 8:30, and I'm gone. I already made this video too long. The name of my book is No Love for Thy Neighbor. And let me say this too. This is the book, No Love for Thy Neighbor. If you want to order a copy, it's explaining some things in here as well. I got another book I'm working on, Life is Not a Diamond. That's going to break down a lot of things as well. Some of the things that I'm talking about now, it's going to break them down in that book. Other things, I'm going to have the documents in the book that you can see for yourself. So you can see how I went through the processes of learning these things. This is on corporatefreedomgroup.com. My word puzzle book, headache word puzzle, support that too. This is on headachewordpuzzle.com. And starting this new company, Vision Masters Media. Just working on a website. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff. Photo shoots, videography, business cards, flyers, posters, resumes, press kits, music production, chroma key, graphics, logos, mixing, everything, you name it. Stuff I like doing. Check it out. VisionMastersMedia.com. It's all coming to you. Let me see. Okay. No love for thy neighbor, right? Oh, thanks. Side G, I appreciate it. Corporate Freedom Group. CorporateFreedomGroup.com. Proclamation of our nationality does not make us free. I don't believe it do either. I don't even think I talked about that. But yeah, proclamation, I don't believe of nationality makes you free. See, first, you got to come from under that system. And if you under that system, you're going to be subject to that system. So you can twist it and bend it, but it's a certain process. When you look at all these other countries or people within these countries that became free, they all followed a certain rule. They all did notes to the UN and things like that to declare their freedom so that they can get recognized as sovereign states. They got recognized as sovereign states, or that they have sovereign freedoms and things like that. Some people fought, some people put up resistance. The most Yassam Bey situation, right? Most deaf. He got his ass sent to Africa, talking that back to Africa shit, and they sent his ass up out of here. He ain't know what he was doing. You know what I'm saying? He should have hit me up. He'd have still been here off of that visa. I mean, without that visa. Renunciation at all. Okay. All right. The formulating pain instruction. Okay, I think I'm good, man. I think I'm good. I think I explained enough. Just make sure you support me for dropping this information. Share my videos. Pretty pleased with sugar on top. Share the videos, and I'm gonna post this on YouTube. Go to YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I need subscribers now, damn it. All of y'all watching right now, Uno Self, go to YouTube, put in Uno Self, and let me get your subscription. I appreciate it. And I'm gonna keep coming. I got a lot of information, a lot of stuff, a lot of experience doing things, personal experience, things that you won't hear anywhere else but right here on the Sleep Sheep podcast. This is where you're gonna get it at, right here. And some things you may have heard, but I'm gonna break it down in layman's terms, and then you do the research, and then we keep building on it, and then eventually we're gonna pop that bubble. We're gonna pop that bubble. All right, I think I'm gone, man. Enjoying these tears. Damn, this shit is strong. Woo. Man, I hate to leave y'all. Y'all want some more? Watch the video again. And support your boy. Support your boy. But I'm gone. Peace. I talked about slavery, chattel paper, the documents that you enslaved by. And then, like I said, I may get into the specific solutions on freeing yourself from the enslavement of the colony, which is now the United States, under their rule, their sovereign rule. And I'm gone. Peace to the gods. Hold it down. See you next week.